I've had an extensive history in science and in medicine, but I think the way I'd like to be remembered as the person who has taken the technical science of glutathione research and made it accessible to the average person on the street. So I've done a lot in my career, but the last 30 years I've dedicated to studying a single molecule called glutathione. I guess you have to be a little bit crazy to do that, but we've seen 30 years come and go, and I'm actually quite proud of the material that I've done, and I hope that it serves you all well. My background is pretty typical for a North American academic physician. In the 3 years that it took for me to get out of medical school, I had maybe 2 or 3 afternoons on nutrition. Back in my days, if you wanted to know anything about nutrition, you had to study it yourself. And I went into a field of medicine that typified conventional medicine. I became an emergency room specialist. Between my days in Canada's far north and Atlanta's inner city and teaching emergency medicine at McGill University, I got really good at fixing things that were broken. You name it, the more difficult the case, the more challenging it was. I became very good at repairing damage. Now, something happened to me that changed my life, and I know that the same thing happened to a whole bunch of you as well. I turned 40, had 2 kids. You see, this can really change a person's perspective, and it dawned on me that it made infinitely more sense, rather than to fix things that are broken, was to prevent them from getting broken in the first place. So I went from emergency medicine into family medicine. I went from a situation of pure chaos to being locked up in a room with one other person who usually looked better and felt better than I did. You see, in a busy city emergency room, most people are either too traumatized or too drunk to say much. Dr. Gutman, what kind of vitamins should I be taking? Dr. Gutman, I'm 60 years old. What kind of exercise should I be getting? Dr. Gutman, I want to lose weight. What do you know about high protein diets? And my answer to them was most often a shrug of my shoulders. And now let me tell you something about doctors. One thing that doctors really hate is feeling stupid. How many times can I shrug my shoulders before my ego starts to take a beating? So I took it upon myself to start studying nutrition and start studying natural products and to start studying supplementation. And what I saw was there was a lot out there that really disappointed me, but just because it didn't have the quality of scientific validation. I even found stuff out there that was actually quite dangerous for your health. Don't think that because a product is natural, it means that it's good for you. Don't think that it's because it's natural that it's safe. Arsenic is natural. Cocaine is natural. I generally don't recommend these to my patients. And then there were also a few products that were absolute jewels, products that could be integrated into any doctor's practice. And I'm trying to sort all this out of my head. And one day, minding my own business, in comes one of my patients. Actually, he doesn't just walk in, he kind of bursts his way into my office and his eyes are all bugging out. And this was a patient who was a former Golden Gloves boxing champion. And when he bursts into an office, it can make quite an impression. And he says to me, Dr. Gutman, I found something that can take care of her and help with and and make, and I had to cut him off and say, whoa, how can one substance possibly have an effect on so many different problems? It sounds like you're reading off of a can of snake oil. His answer to me was a big thud on my desk. And it wasn't his oversized fist slamming my desk. It was the sound of 30 pounds of research hitting the top of my desk. And he said to me, Jimmy, you're going to take this home and you're going to read this. Now, most of my patients don't talk to me this way, but I guess if you're a boxing champion, you can get away with it. And what he managed to do with this 30 pounds of literature was absolutely ruin the next 3 months of my life. I couldn't stop reading it. I was up all night on my computer. I was canceling clinics to get more articles. And what I was looking at was both amazing and embarrassing. Amazing because it was about a tiny molecule so critical to our health, and embarrassing because I knew practically nothing about it. But I was extremely fortunate because most of the best research and some of the most novel stuff had happened literally in my own backyard at McGill University in Montreal. And the doctor, Dr. Gustavo Bounous, who was the key author in most of these papers, lived only a couple miles from me. What incredible fortune. So I called this patient back and I said to him, look, I've read all of your stuff and more. I want to talk to Dr. Bounous. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks later, I had a date to meet Gustavo Bounous, PhD. A meeting that would, again, change my life. Right. I decided then and there that this whole project was too important for me not to take part in. So I phased out of what I was doing and I put 100% of my attention into this molecule, glutathione, and here we are 30 years later. Well, let me start off by talking about Dr. Bounous. Yes. Dr. Bounous was clearly a genius. The pictures that you see of him is this good-looking, well-kempt doctor in a white jacket smiling out at you. This is actually not what Dr. Bounous looked like. Walking into Dr. Bounous was like walking into a hurricane. Books and paper everywhere. His hair was out like Einstein. And this is a man that really lived for his research. He was born in Italy and spent most of his life in Italy. And when he moved to North America, he certainly brought along a lot of that old world mentality. He loved Italian food. He loved spaghetti. He loved Italian wine. And remember, he's old world. He loved a pretty girl, but he lived for his research. He never cared about money. And he lived in a small apartment and had a very modest lifestyle. He was also a cranky old man. He was always ready to share his sense of humor with you, which tended to be very dry. I used to have, eventually I had an office that was right next to his. And one day I heard through the wall a bunch of screaming and laughing, which was very unusual. You usually didn't hear any laughing from his room. And so I went out and I knocked on the door of his office and I walked in. And there was this 4-year-old child absolutely destroying his office. And his parents weren't doing anything about it. But Dr. Bounous was laughing. And I asked him, like, what's the reason to be laughing here? He said, this boy's blood test just came back. Both of his parents were HIV positive. They both had AIDS. And the boy himself had AIDS. And Dr. Bounous had put them on a number of months earlier. And the boy's blood test came back. The viral load was 0. So Dr. Bounous was able to rejoice on this very dramatic event. This is what he lived for. Dr. Kongshavn was this very elegant, tall, beautiful British professor. And when you speak English with a British accent, it automatically adds 30 points to your IQ. Can you just say this about Dr. Patricia Kongshavn? I call her, and other people call her, the great-grandmother of clinical immunology. What right does she have to be called the great-grandmother of clinical immunology? See, even as late as the 1970s, there was no medical specialty called clinical immunology. Patricia wrote the first chapter in the first book of clinical immunology that was broadly disseminated to the medical field. The first book on clinical immunology opens up with Dr. Kongshavn's work. And also, being a woman, which was rare in that field then, she was a true pioneer. And Dr. Kongshavn, she's 90 years old. She still takes part in our science. It was just wonderful having the privilege to know these two individuals. I think that we need to recognize what we mean by a nutraceutical, medicinal food, and a drug. A lot of these terms are defined legally, which means that they mean different things in different countries. There are still substances available to us that you don't need a prescription for, that are artificially made. And on the contrary, there are foods that can be considered drugs. For example, Immunotec is as natural a food as you could find. And in different countries, it's called food. In different countries, it's called a nutraceutical. And there are countries in which Immunotec is considered a drug and is sold through the pharma system. So perhaps a more accurate term would be a natural product. Now, Immunotec has to be as close to nature as possible, otherwise it wouldn't work. Immunotec is a collection of proteins that need to be in their natural three-dimensional shape, otherwise they lose their ability to raise glutathione. If they're agitated too much by mechanical means or they're heated, Immunotec loses its ability to raise glutathione. So this is truly a natural product. Now, getting back to the pharmacy industry, this is a huge worldwide machine worth billions of dollars, and it represents a huge bureaucracy. So the safety and quality of drugs are going to vary a lot. And the power of these pharmacy industries is enormous, to the point where they have a huge influence on the way doctors practice their medicine. And doctors that are practicing clinical medicine don't have time to research. So they put a lot of faith into the research that comes out of the pharmacy industry. And the pharmacy industry uses university doctors as well to do their research. So clearly there's the room for what we call bias. A doctor or a researcher will either consciously or unconsciously make the results of a study lean in favor of a positive outcome for the medication. And this is why we use designs like a double-blinded, placebo-controlled study, which is a good effort to remove bias from the outcome of a study. However, it still happens. And I wouldn't hesitate to say that it still happens with a conscious decision to make the outcome look better than what it actually is. There are many examples of classes of drugs that 5 or 10 years later, or even 20 years later, after their release, we find out the real truth about the drug and its research. One example of this, for example, are antidepressants, which are still very much overprescribed. And only now are we beginning to understand not just the side effects, but the long-term effects and the difficulties of getting off of these drugs. So doctors need to take this research with a grain of salt. They need to be very skeptical, and they need to ask more questions, and as does the general public. So I guess that's a little bit critical of the pharmacy industry, but I tend to be a cynic. I'm just as cynical about natural products. So people need to ask the same questions. Is there reasonable proof to show that a natural product does what it's supposed to do? But definitely, I think the way the world is moving, that we're doing more formal clinical research on natural products to show what works and what doesn't work. And I think this is the only way that natural products are going to bridge the gap between natural medicine and conventional medicine. And of course, the perfect example is Immunotec. 100% natural product that has gone through 40 plus years of clinical human research, so that the average person on the street, as well as the average doctor doing practice, can read this, understand it, and believe that it works. I think that Immunotec in the last few years has done a remarkable job spreading the word. We keep on expanding our market into different countries. So the marketing arm of Immunotec has been quite good. Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Marketing and science don't always see eye to eye. Marketing would like to say and do much more than science would agree with. But one thing that makes this company great is that the executive office of Immunotec really listens to the scientists, because they understand that if the science that we give to people is true and valid and proven, that is the key to success rather than quick growth. Because sustained growth rather than quick growth depends on a person's belief and their trust in the company. We have people who have been taking this product for over 30 years, and they may or may not be active Immunotec distributors, but their loyalty to the product means that they're going to be taking it the rest of their life. I think the most important thing that someone could do is a little bit of homework. Many things are presented on the internet. Many things are presented by marketing sites. You need to take at least a brief look at the science involved, not just on glutathione. If you're looking at a product, you need to be sure that this product works. And the only proof that a product works is if you have published studies on the outcome of this product in human beings. It's very easy to find on Immunotec. It's exceedingly rare to find on other products.